No announcements, I can't believe it.
Oh, man.
You got any announcements you want to
Jim,
make?
could you do the announcement over again? Because it didn't go on
You didn't go,
record.
you may start this thing over
Yeah,
again?
just start over except for the announcements part.
You're gonna have to listen to me again. There we
Okay.
go. Welcome to the College of Complexes. This is our 432nd meeting since we started in February 2009. We put a speaker on every week, a different subject. We require a speaker to take a position on an issue or express a point of view. They have to be for or against something. We don't care what it is. We give them an hour to make a presentation. Up to an hour. If anybody interrupts the speaker, we remind the interrupter, we'll listen only one fool at a time. It's one of our rules. Then we have question and answers from the audience of the speaker. Then we have remarks, rebuttals. Everybody in the audience that wants to gets 5 minutes at the podium to respond to the speaker said for or against. Our speaker gets the last word, gets a comment, and the comment close to be. That's how it works. But before we introduce our speaker, now is the time for announcements. Anybody have any announcements they want to make? Oh, I did that right. Anyway, our speaker next week is John Lee. John and Lee, she can talk about from impertinence to freedom. I won't read all this. You got it in your itinerary. On October 27th, Julie Britton will be our speaker. She can talk about I'm recognizing the only thing to fear is fear itself. That's in your itinerary. On November 3rd, John Beasley, he's sitting right there, he'll be our speaker. He's going to talk about lessons from Karl Marx, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Again, I won't read all this, it's on your itinerary. November 10th, don't like fake news, then you should not be an American Indian. That's Gary Foster, he's going to talk about that. It's on your itinerary. On November 17th, on the Power of Small Numbers by Tony Robinson. November 24th, this Thanksgiving weekend, we won't have a meeting. December 1st, on the question of juvenile criminal justice reform, that's Elizabeth Coey. She'll be talking about that. It'll be interesting. It's on your itinerary. December 15th, the Cult of Saints and Relics, Medieval Martyrs and Miracles. That's Dr. Paul Benson. He's Professor of Humanities, Mountain View College. Anyway, it should be interesting. But our speaker tonight is Jim Gatewood. He's sitting back there. He's going to talk about J. Frank Norris and the Top of the Hill Casino. He's a history professor emeritus at Richland College. He's a best-selling author from Dallas. He will discuss what happened through a time when gambling and prostitution were on a collision course with J. Frank Norris and his firebrand of old-time Baptist religion. He points to a Texas historical marker that stands today in Arlington, Texas, at the great entrance to the 37-acre campus of the Arlington Baptist College, which denotes that this was once a campus of the most opulent casino in the northern hemisphere during the Roaring '20s. Jim shows that the Top of the Hill Casino was a temple of chance that sat at the top of a geological outcropping jutting 1,000 feet above the valley floor below, the highest point in Tarrant County. A road winding through the native oak trees protected by good stone turreted towers filtered out all those who could afford Texas no limit, a game of chance. He also points out that at the time of our history in Las Vegas was only a dusty spot on the map of Nevada. Jim argues that the Top of the Hill Casino beckoned to the rich and the famous, Hollywood stars and their producers, as well as Texas oil barons who felt fully alive only when a fortune was on the line. And there is much more about the new rich who came here or to try and break the casino's bank. And what you can learn from why casino did not survive the march of time. He will also bring books to those who wish to purchase same. Without further ado, please give us a very, very warm welcome to Jim Gatewood. Hope I didn't massacre that too bad.
Thank you. J. Frank Norris was a sensational Baptist preacher. He was so sensational that he raised the members of the First Baptist Church in Fort Worth from 600 to over 25,000.
Wow.
Now his mother, when he was 12 years old, was sitting on the front porch of their farm in Hubbard, Texas. Now Hubbard, Texas is halfway between Corsicana and Waco. Flat, hot, uninteresting land, but it does raise good cotton. And it was in the evening time, and the father hadn't come home yet. The father was an alcoholic. And she's sitting there with her son, and she has a revelation. A man in flowing white robes comes and touches young J. Frank Norris with his staff and tells his mother this is going to be the world's greatest Baptist preacher, and he will cast Satan from the earth. Now J. Frank Norris was read the Bible every morning. First thing, his mother read him a chapter out of the Bible. When he was 12 years old, he was out in the field chopping cotton, and he saw 3 horsemen ride up to the porch of his house where his father was there. They were discussing. J. Frank wasn't paying much attention, and then all of a sudden there's gunfire. Now this was back in the days before we had smokeless powder, and when those pistols goes off, there's just a big cloud of dust comes out. And J. Frank couldn't see what was happening, but he ran towards the 3 horsemen with his hoe. And he attacked them, and he, in return, was shot 3 times. He laid on the ground paralyzed. His mother and father did the best they could. They sent to Waco, and by dusk that evening, 2 doctors arrived, 2 specialists. J. Frank had a bullet very close to his spine, which they said could never be removed, that he would be a paraplegic for the rest of his life. And they told the mother and father, they said, gangrene has already set in and your son probably will not live through the night. The mother screamed at them, get out of this house. This boy is destined to be the world's greatest Baptist preacher, and he will cast Satan from the earth. Now go. And the 2 doctors left. J. Frank Norris laid in bed for 2 years, and his mother ministered to him every day. Every day she read the Bible, every day they discussed it. She would ask questions, he would ask questions, they would try and determine what the answer was. By the time he was 18, he was ambulatory. He was able to walk. And he enrolled in Baylor University, and how that family paid for him to go to Baylor, I don't know, but they did. He graduated valedictorian of his class. Then he went on to a seminary in Virginia where he again graduated valedictorian from his class, and he married the minister's daughter, and they came to Dallas. He was the pastor in 1905 of the McKinney Avenue Baptist Church here in Dallas. Now in 1908, the pastor of the First Baptist Church in Fort Worth died, and they called on him to come over there. And one of the first things the people of Fort Worth remember about J. Frank Norris was they got up, and right across Main Street was this huge banner that said, come to church on Sunday and find out why Dallas beat Fort Worth. So they came to church on Sunday, and J. Frank told them that Dallas had a plan and Fort Worth didn't. And he said, my plan, and he ran down to the other end of the church there. Then he ran back up and he slid into the pulpit. He said, I'm going to knock a home run for Jesus. And he went around and around the church asking people to follow him and knock a home run for Jesus. Those of you that saw the film Elmer Gantry may remember that particular scene because they replayed it. Now Sinclair Lewis came to Fort Worth to study J. Frank Norris, and that's where he got the cannon fodder for his book, Elmer Gantry. And that book won the Nobel Prize in 1930. Now J. Frank Norris continued on there at the church, and there was a plumber's son by the name of Fred Browning who was a compulsive gambler, and he opened a casino on the second floor of the Westbrook Hotel there in Fort Worth. Now, in the film Elmer Gantry, you see these torchlight parades where they're going down the street and they go into saloons and they have axes and they tear up the equipment. And that is exactly what J. Frank Norris and his Baptist people were doing there in Fort Worth. And this was so pesky and happened so often that Fred Browning decided that he would build a citadel, a fortress for his casino. And he started looking for land to do this. Now there was a 37-acre parcel of land, 11 miles out of Fort Worth, almost in Arlington at the time. And it was the top of the hill tea room. Two old maid sisters owned it. And in the afternoons, the ladies that would like to play bridge in Arlington would gather there and play bridge, and she would serve tea. Beautifully landscaped. They had built lakes and put fountains in them and had gardens. Fred Browning and his wife called on these two ladies and made them an offer they couldn't refuse, and they sold that property to Browning. And he built a state-of-the-art casino there. In fact, Bugsy Siegel, later on, was a guest there, and he went back to Las Vegas, and that he used many of the ideas for his Flamingo casino that he built in Las Vegas, Nevada, were original in Fred Browning's casino. But this was the most opulent casino in the Northern Hemisphere, and Fred Browning had a passion for racehorses, and he paid W.T. Wagner in Fort Worth $130,000 for a stallion. Now, of all the people that came through the top of the hill casino, probably Sid Richardson was one of the most colorful. The way Sid Richardson came, he had gone broke in Fort Worth. He made a lot of money in the oil business and then lost it all. And he was actually destitute, and Fred Browning told him, he said, "Sid, if you'll come over to the casino," he said, "we will provide you with room and board. And the reason we want you here is because these Texas oil men come here. They're intent on breaking the casino. And of course, most of the time they lose most of their cash. Then they reach into their pocket and they come out with oil properties they want to put on the table, and they want a line of credit based on their oil properties, and we have no idea what that's worth. So if you'll come over and advise us, we'll put you up." And Sid Richardson spent a great deal of time there, but things turned for him when he made a friend out of Amon Carter, the owner of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and those two went into the oil business and did quite well. Now, another fellow that came through there was H.L. Hunt. H.L. Hunt had married two women without getting a divorce. He had 3 children by the first one, and he had 2 children by the second one. And he'd opened up his office in Dallas, and he fell in love with his secretary. He romanced her at Top of the Hill Casino. They came out there and dined and danced, and he wound up marrying her. Now, he had that home there on White Rock Lake, and he bought that house in 1936. He was moving to Dallas because he had not been able to get a loan from any banks, and finally he got a loan from the First National Bank in Dallas, so he decided since his source of money was there, he'd move his family there. Well, he'd been living there for about 2 years when he fell in love with his secretary of his, and he bought her a house a block and a half away from his own home. And I can't help but think about H.L. Hunt long about dusk, hollering up at the wife. Her name was Etta. I said, "Etta, I'm going to take the dog for a walk. I'll be back in about an hour and a half." That was H.L. Hunt, and he came through there. Now, the story that I love to tell is a story about a fellow named Lou Jenkins. Lou Jenkins was born in Brownwood, Texas. His father was a sharecropper, cotton sharecropper, which at that particular time in our history, that was a pretty good way to make money because you could, if you had 40 acres and you got a good cotton crop, you could pay for it the first year. But when Lou Jenkins was 7 years old, they had a drought in cotton, back to back, 2 years. And all the cotton farmers, and of course those that were cotton sharecroppers, went broke. So Father Jenkins loads his 7 children onto a flatbed truck and leaves for Sweetwater, Texas. Now he gets to Sweetwater, Texas. The reason he came there is because he has a brother there who has a blacksmith shop. And he knows that he can help his brother and put enough food on the table to feed his family. Lou Jenkins is 7 years old, and when he's not in school, he's working in that blacksmith shop. And his job is to take a tong and take those red hot shoes and put them on an anvil and hammer them into the proper shape. And of course he's doing that after school. In the summertime he does it full time. And boy, does he get a good right arm handling that hammer. Well, when he is 16 years old, the carnival comes to Sweetwater, Texas. And there's 2 things those boys are interested in. Number 1 is a little gray mule that you pay 10 cents to ride it. If you can stay on the mule for 3 minutes, you win $10.
Ooh.
Well, nobody could ride that little mule. He knew what he was doing. And those country boys, he was just throwing them off left and right. Now, the other thing Lou was interested in, they had bare knuckle fighting. And if you defeated the carnival's fighter, who would be someone within 10 pounds of your own weight, then you would win whatever money was spent to see that fight that night. If you could stay with him for 3 rounds, even if he defeated you, you'd make $4. So Lou wanted to try this out. And he got into the ring, and if you can imagine, here's Lou Jenkins. He weighs about 130 pounds. He's a lanky boy. And he's got on overalls, no shoes, he's barefooted, no shirt. And his opponent, of course, is one of the stable of fighters that travels with the carnival, about his same size. The referee's got his arms around the 2 boys. He said, now boys, there's no kicking, no biting, and no eye gouging. But when the bell rings, you come out and start swinging. So with this information is all he has about what's about to happen to him. The bell rings. Lou Jenkins runs across the ring and hits his opponent just as hard as he can with that good right hand, knocks him out. Well, he has won $7. That's the amount of money he won that night. He took that home and gave it to his mother because there was never enough food to feed the family properly. Second helpings were just out of the question. And he tossed and turned that night thinking about that fight and the money he made, and he was down in the carnival yard the next morning sitting on the steps of the manager's, the owner's wagon. And when the owner got up, Lou introduced himself. The owner remembered him, and he told the manager, he said, look, he said, I know the blacksmith business. I can pull my weight with the blacksmith work, but I also want to do some more fighting. Well, the manager talked to the trainer, the coach that coached the boxers, and he was excited about having Lou come in, so Lou got on with the carnival. Now, over the next 2-year period of time, Lou Jenkins had over 600 fights. He won all of them. Sometimes he fought 2 and 3 times a night. Sometimes there was a fellow that would weigh 200 pounds or more, much bigger than Lou. Nobody would fight him. Lou would fight him, and usually wound up knocking the guy out. But in 1930, the carnival went broke. And Lou Jenkins and his friend Billy Lemons start riding the rails. They want to get Dad Joyner had bought in a new well, and there's an oil patch in East Texas that they want to get to because they can get a job. So they're riding the rails, but they get thrown off the train in Dallas.
No.
Now it's just getting dark and it's starting to rain. Fortunately, Billy Lemons is from Dallas. He knows his way around. So he shows Lou how to hang on to the back end of one of those streetcars and hunker down so the motorman can't see you. And they ride up Main Street and they get off right there behind Baylor because there is a graveyard of abandoned streetcars there. It's right when Dallas was switching from the electric, they were switching into the electric from the mule-drawn streetcars. And derelict people are sleeping and staying in these streetcars, and Billy Lemon knew about that. And they make the rounds hoping that somebody has made a little too much stew or something so they can get something to eat. But there was nothing to eat, so the boys went to bed hungry. Now the rain came that night, it thundered and the lightning flashed, and the next morning the sun came out. The two boys went to a diner that was right there behind the Baylor Hospital. Lou Jenkins had $1 and he put that on the counter, and for that $1 the boys got a cup of coffee and a donut, which they shared. And they started walking downtown Dallas looking for work, but they couldn't find any work. Now on the way back to the streetcar graveyard, they were coming back on Elm Street and they came to a building, and out in front of the building there were posters of these spiders striking their posts. Lou said, let's go in here, maybe I can pick up a fight and we can get enough money to get something to eat. So he and Billy Lemons went inside, they climbed a flight of stairs and they came to a closed door, and they knocked on the plate glass of the door, and a voice from within said, come in. The boys opened the door and there was a fellow by the name of John Hall with his feet up on the desk, smoking a cigar, reading a racing form. Said, what can I do for you boys? Lou said, well, we saw the posters outside with the fighters posing and we thought maybe I could get a fight tonight. Said, we're hungry, we hadn't had anything to eat for 3 days, and we're looking for work. John Hall told him, he said, well, he said, if you can get in there and go for 4 rounds, you get paid $5. And Lou said, well, that's fine. He said, I'll sure try that. And John Hall told him, said, well, go on down in the locker room and pick out some shoes and some shorts, and you'll go on about 8 o'clock tonight. Well, Lou Jenkins and Billy Lemon went down there and they tried to sleep on one of those training tables. Lou said, I couldn't sleep and I was so hungry, my stomach was hurting. Said, I didn't think 8 o'clock would ever get there, but it did. Said, they came and got me and I had my shorts on and my shoes. Said, I never fought inside before and the cigar smoke was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Said they had indoor lights, which I wasn't used to. Referee came out, the same thing, boys, there's no biting or eye gouging, no kicking. When the bell rings, start swinging. Now what John Hall didn't tell Lou Jenkins was that the fighter that he was going up against was the lightweight champion of the state of Texas. John Tom McCullum was his name. The fight started, and Lou said, I just remember swinging as hard as I could, and this other guy was tough, and at the end of the first round I came back and I was so tired and so weak I hadn't had anything to eat, I just laid down instead of sitting on my stool. Said the referee kicked me to get me up for the second round. I went out there, the second round, same thing. I'm swinging, this guy is just tougher than a boot. I'm not making any way. And I come back at the end of the second round and I put my arms around the referee and I said, look, I hadn't had anything to eat in 3 days. I'm sick, I'm weak, and I'm scared of that fellow over there and I want to quit. The referee pushed him back out in the ring and said, go on out there, you can finish this round and you'll get your $4. Lou went out there, he said, I ducked my head and I just started swinging just as hard as I could. Said the crowd started roaring. Said I'd never heard a crowd roar like that. Of course, this is more people than he's ever fought in front of before. Said I just thought, well, maybe they do that in Dallas. Maybe that's the way they conduct themselves. The fight was over, and Lou said I was so weak I could hardly stand up, and the referee came over and got me, and he got the Cullum boy, and he led us out to the middle of the ring. And he held up my arm and said, Lou Jenkins is the new lightweight champion of the state of Texas. Well, Lou is in Dallas now, and they got enough money the first day. They went to an all-night place that served pancakes, and it was all the pancakes you could eat for $25. And Lou ate pancakes till he just had plenty, but he went outside and leaned up against the telephone post and threw up. But they settled down in Dallas, and Lou didn't train. The girls liked him, and he stayed up late with the girls, and he liked to play poker, and he gambled. He didn't train, but he was winning fights. Nobody could beat him. Now the year 1935 came along, and Dallas was getting ready for the Texas Centennial. A fellow by the name of Fred McLemore here in Dallas built a sportatorium. He built a sportatorium for the Texas Centennial. And they wanted to get somebody to come down here and fight Lou Jenkins because he had knocked out most of the people that he fought. Well, they couldn't get anybody to come down and fight this nobody in Dallas, Texas, so Benny Binion and Mary Thornton and Fred McLemore are having lunch at the Blue Front Cafe down on Main Street in Dallas. And McLemore is complaining. And Benny Binion said, well, I'll put up $2,500 as a pot. He said, that ought to bring somebody down. He said, the winner can take $2,500. And Mary Thornton said, I'll pay the expenses of whoever comes down. So with this bait out there, a fellow by the name of Chino Alvarez, who was the 4th ranked lightweight fighter in the United States, said, I'll come to Dallas. And he came down, and the odds were 10-1 in favor of Chino Alvarez. Now, Fred Browning out there at the top of the hill casino told his bookie, he said, find out how much money they got and bet it all on Lou Jenkins. Yeah. So the fight started, and it lasted 28 seconds. And I took a picture out of the Dallas Times-Herald, and it's in the book. Chino Alvarez's knees are bent. He's going down like this. Lou Jenkins is drawn back, about to hit him again. Well, that got Lou some attention, and his next fight was in Chicago. There was a boy up there they called the Butcher Boy. He went to Chicago, and before the fight started, 3 men came into his dressing room, and they said, look, this guy you're about to fight is a sadistic maniac. He said he likes to hurt people. He said he puts people in the hospital. The best thing for you to do is to forfeit the fight. Well, Lou Jenkins is from West Texas and talks cheap. So he got into the ring with the Butcher Boy, and the second round he knocked the Butcher Boy out. Now in the meantime, down in Corpus Christi, Texas, they've got their champion, a fellow by the name of Delgado. And the betting is heavy between Dallas and Galveston on the fighters. And the fight's going to be at Fred McLemore's Sportatorium. And Lou is getting ready for the fight. He's in there. It's about 45 minutes or an hour till the fight starts. And 3 men come into his dressing room. Sam and Joe Campisi, and a fellow by the name of Nick Cassio. Nick Cassio is the spokesman for the group. And he said, Lou, he said, I'm going to show you how to make more money in one night than your father made all his lifetime sharecropping. And he explained to Lou that he wanted him to throw the fight in the 3rd round. Ooh. Lou thought about it. He liked money. He said, okay, we can do that. So the fight started. And in the 3rd round, Lou has got Delgado in a clinch. And he looks over his shoulder, and Nick Cassio is giving him that go down sign. But he looks behind Nick Cassio, and there's a row of girls back there, and he knows every one of them. And he also knows that those girls have bet their rent money on him. And he thinks about it, and he's got Delgado in a clinch, so he stomps Delgado's foot. Well, of course that hurts. So Delgado is reaching for his hurt foot, and Lou decks him. And he knows that's a knockout punch. He doesn't wait to hear the referee count. He vaults over the top rope, runs down into his locker room, gathers up his clothes and possibles he has out there, rushes outside, stuffs them into the saddlebag of his big Indian motorcycle, and roars off into the dark. Now he doesn't shut that motorcycle down until he gets to his mother's home, in Sweetwater, Texas. He goes inside, gives her the money he's got, sells his motorcycle, gives her that money, and joins the Army under a fictitious name.
Joins the what?
Now, the Army loves him.
Oh, the Army.
They give him weekend passes for fights. They give him furloughs for fights. He fights 14 times while he's in the Army. He wins 12 of them by knockouts, the other 2 by decision. But on his last fight for the Army, while he's in the Army, he fights at a place called Ringside. Now, Ringside is a little tavern. It's on the Fort Worth, they call it the Fort Worth Turnpike at the time. And it's right across the street from the Top of the Hill Casino. And out back, they've got a big oak tree that shades a boxing ring. Now, at this time in our history, there's no TV and very few radios, if any. And for amusement, what they do in that tavern, anytime there's any consternation between 2 of the people, 2 of the patrons, they'll put the boxing gloves on them, put them in the ring, and then they got something to bet on who's going to win the fight. This is their type of entertainment at ringside. But they also have professional fights when they can, and they had booked Lou Jenkins against a very colorful fighter from Fort Worth. And Fred Browning, the owner of the casino, came and saw the fight, and he told Lou, he said, well, I want to manage you, I want to be your manager. Lou said, well, you can't manage me, I'm in the Army. Fred Browning said, that's no problem, I'll buy your contract from the Army. Now, it's 1932, and I cut an article out of the Times Herald where Fred Browning, owner of the Top of the Hill Casino, bought Lou Jenkins' contract from the Army for $50. Got him out of the Army. So now he's fighting professionally for Fred Browning. And there's just one fight after another. Every time the odds are 8-1, 5-1, and so forth. Fred Browning always says, find out how much money they got and cover it all. Finally, in 1939, Lou Jenkins is fighting a fellow by the name of Lou Ambers for the World's Lightweight Championship. Now, Lou Ambers has been champ for 7 years. He's had 421 professional fights. He's won 97 of them by knockouts. The odds are 5-1 in favor of Lou Ambers winning the World Championship, retaining the championship. Fred Browning, right here in Arlington, Top of the Hill Casino, which is probably 30 miles or so from here, said find out how much money they got and cover it all. The fight started, and in the first round, Lou Jenkins knocks down Lou Ambers 5 times. Lou Ambers comes back to his corner, and his second and his manager say, we don't know how this boy's doing this, but in the second round, just stay away from him and we'll figure out some strategy for you. So in the second round, Lou Ambers is backing up and trying to get away from Lou Jenkins, and he only gets knocked down 3 times. And he comes back to his corner at the end of the second round. He's been knocked down 8 times. The ring doctor comes in and takes a look at him, stops the fight. His face looks like hammered hamburger that's bleeding. So Lou Jenkins, 2 months before his 24th birthday, is the world lightweight champion. Fred Browning, out there in Arlington, has made over $1 million, always betting on his boy and taking the odds. Lou Jenkins immediately challenged the next weight up to welterweight, and he won the world's welterweight championship. In that fight, he made $80,000. Now, after I had written the book, and it had been out, I guess, 6 months or so, I got a telephone call from Los Angeles. And it was Lou Jenkins' son. And he thanked me for writing the book about his dad. And of course, I followed newspaper articles, and that's where I got most of my information. Now, we have these books back there, that, and we've got the one about the assassination of Kennedy. We've got the one about Bonnie Parker, Clyde Barrow. Bonnie Parker had a baby daughter. We've got that book. We've got Slaps Rogers and the Love Field Lunatics. Slaps Rogers built the first airplane built in the state of Texas down here at Cleburne, Texas. I'll come back and tell you that story sometime. It's a good one. Anyway, you can have any book on the table for $20 and I'll sign it for you. Now, are there any questions? Has anybody got any questions? Yeah.
follow up with the Baptist minister, what's going to happen there?
He died at age 53 in Florida at a camp for children. But he died before the top of the hill got in trouble financially because in 1946, gambling was outlawed and everybody moved to Las Vegas, and top of the hill just died under its own power.
Okay, we'll have questions here in a minute. He's going to get the mic fixed.
Okay, what's the other?
Yes, Jim, this is your good friend Curtis. And I've been over to Fort Worth and where J. Frank Norris was, so his grave, the cemetery and everything like that. I've tried to find, and I've heard he was a Klan member. And that shooting that he got by with ER, whoever the guy that he shot said it was in self-defense. Is it true that he got off because most of the jurors were Klan members? And
He was a member of the Klan for a while. Of course, the Klan became very unpopular, like a lot of organizations. There were a lot of good people in there, but there were also some bullies in there. And they disgraced themselves, and of course he withdrew at that time. Now, as far as the shooting goes, J. Frank Norris alienated a lot of people in Fort Worth. You either were a Norrisite or you were against J. Frank Norris. And the owner of Meacham's department store there in Fort Worth and J. Frank Norris were at odds. And one of Meacham's employees, after drinking, showed up in front. Well, first he called him on the phone, told him he was going to come over there and kill him.
Yeah.
So when he did that, J. Frank Norris borrowed a pistol from his janitor, and when the man came in, J. Frank Norris shot him and killed him. Now, he was so popular and so hated in Fort Worth, they moved the venue to Waco to have the trial. And at the trial, all the evidence was heard. Everybody that wanted to say anything, they took testimony. And the jury decided that J. Frank Norris fired in self-defense and was no bill. And the Baptists there sang good old-fashioned religion.
Yeah.
And the anti-Baptists gnashed their teeth. J. Frank Norris came back to Fort Worth, and the church had a big celebration for him. That's the story behind the shooting.
I heard there was a picture of him in an El Camino in a Klan uniform. I haven't been able to find it. Or
I don't know anything about the picture, but I do know that he did. J. Frank Norris embraced the Ku Klux Klan, as did many of the Baptist preachers. At the start, when it started out, well, Ku Klux Klan is a Gaelic phrase, and it translates into the Christian Brotherhood of Political Persuasion. And of course, it was the idea of the Klan to establish Christianity all over the world and end the bloodshed of war. But it got out of hand, as you know.
In 1936, when the fair opened, my father drove the family from Houston to Dallas, all-day trip, two-lane highway. We went to the fair, and my mother and father had a fight because my father was enamored with a person called Sally Rand. We went to Fort Worth for the opening of Casa Manana. That's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
That Casa Manana was, they call that Sally Rand and her nude ranch.
This is kind of hard because I'm trying to open up another area you can give us some wisdom on. Are you familiar at all with the psychiatric hospital down off of, I guess it's Syene? Used to be called Tri-Cities Hospital, but before it was a psychiatric facility.
No, I'm not familiar with that.
The story on that is that the elite back in the 20s used to take their family members there, and they would deliver them over to a car dealership on Buckner, and there was a tunnel that went all the way from Buckner to the basement of the hospital where they would be treated for their addictions. That was back when heroin and cocaine were legal. Do you know anything about that?
I haven't come across that, but I'd like to hear more about it.
Okay.
Yeah, is it true that Harry Hines, of whom the road is named after, he was a very upright person, and he would turn in his grave if he knew what the Harry Hines Road had turned into at the upper end.
I'm not familiar with that. I hadn't been into that facet of Dallas history.
I've been over to the top of the hill. It's really fascinating, and I wonder about those tunnels. Do you know how far they went out?
The tunnels they're still pondering and still finding tunnels there. Of course, the main purpose of the tunnel, the guard out at the gate had a button that he would step on if the law was there. Now, when that button was stepped on, the lights would flash and the dice tables would turn over and become ping pong tables. And the roulette wheels would go into the wall, and there would be cue sticks for playing pool there. The gamblers would go into the tunnel and take some steps that went up to a place called the Tea Garden, which was a patio with a fountain in it, beautifully landscaped. There were benches there, and they would pass out hymn books. So that by the time the law got there, all the gamblers were sitting there singing Rock of Ages.
Did the tunnels go really very far out, or do you know? Or people, I guess they went out to some parking lot or something, and people drove off.
The tunnels are still there. They've modified the one that left the casino because the kitchen is there now. And it used to be, they've even changed this, but when I was first there, when you were in the cafeteria eating, the tunnel was over there that led up to the tea garden. They've expanded and they've taken that space up for the kitchen now.
Are there any other figures besides Bugsy Siegel that made a start or passed through the Texas gambling operation?
Well, I'm sure Bugsy Siegel did, but a lot of them did. I know Benny Benyon loaned Fred Browning money, and Sid Richardson, after Fred Browning died, loaned money to Mrs. Browning through his, he had bought the Fidelity Insurance Company. And the Fidelity Insurance Company made the loan to the top of the hill, and they weren't able to pay it and foreclosed on it, and Sid owned it, and it was Sid, well, it was his company that sold the land to the Arlington Baptist College.
Yes, is it worth going over to see the remains of the casino? Is it over there today, actually?
Yes, in the book, on about the third page, there's a picture of a lady called Vicki Bryant, and her phone number is under that. She is the wife of the president of the college. And if you call her, you can make an appointment. Now, you don't have to have an appointment, but you can call her and make an appointment, and she'll take you through and answer your questions and show you where everything was.
Is the top of the hill, is that the continuation of the Cedar Hill Ridge?
No, it's really is. I like to tell this story about the top of the hill. I interviewed a fellow by the name of Jack Poe, who when he was 11 years old, he ran away from home. And he wound up at top of the hill. Fred Brown and his wife could have no children, so they adopted him. And he told a story about when they were building the casino, Fred Browning had one of these big bank-type safes put in there for his money. And once the casino opened and started, they filled the vault up. And they didn't have any more room for the money, so the money was just laying out there in the floor. And Fred Browning said, well, run it through the hay baler and we'll bail the money. And they did, and they had bales of money there. And Fred Pro said that he remembered coming to the Monday morning meetings. Every Monday morning, Fred Browning would have them come in there and they'd be sitting on bales of money while he's telling them where to go, what their job was for the week.
My question is not related to casinos in Dallas, but in the early 60s, the late 50s and early 60s, they had gambling in Galveston. And the state attorney general closed it down, I believe, in 1961. So you've ever heard anything about that?
I've heard of it, but it's out of my territory. I don't have any connections there.
That was my question. It was the Balinese room run by the
Yeah.
Nacio brothers in Galveston, and it was a competitor, perhaps, of the top of the hill.
Well, those same guys tried to take over Dallas, and Benny Bain took care of that.
Yeah, go back to Noel.
Were there any musicians who were a note that were there at the top of the hill?
Yes, Tommy Dorsey and his band, all the big name bands played there.
I don't remember the lady sitting there. She has such a photographic memory that speaks at top of the hill. Was there any violence there, or do you know?
Sure. There was violence, there were fights, the place was robbed, and the gambler got in, a couple of gamblers got in a fight up there at the tea garden. One of them shot and killed the other one. And supposedly there's a well on the back of the property that's where they dumped the dead bodies and they forced the mine on top. If there's no more questions, I'm going to go eat like my son.
Now it's your turn to talk, so you got 5 minutes to respond to what the speaker had to say for or against. Anybody that wants to, come on up here. Who's first? Anybody have any comments?
It's hard to have comments for that, John.
Well, I'm just saying, it's, you know,
It's
I don't want to be the only one that's standing here.
very good
Comments?
presentation.
Oh, terrific presentation.
Where do you go from here?
Well, I want to thank our speaker for doing a great job. I'm speechless. I don't know what to ask him. It's pretty sad, but he's a great author. I don't know what else to say. Anyway, see you all next week. That's it for our thing, but our speaker's right here. If you want to buy a book from him, you can get it. He's got them all there, and he'll sign them for you. So I don't know what else to say, so thank you very much.